our next speaker is here to tell us about the confidence gap. She is a business and career strategist and former director of strategy for IBM Australia, and currently the co-founder and director of Positive Leaders. Please welcome to the stage Megan Dalla Camina.
Hello. I have to wear my glasses because there's so many of you. It's great to be here. I had a similar experience, Erin, when I was back in my early days at GE, back in the days of no video, Skype or anything like that, just conference calls, and I was doing work with a very senior gentleman in India and organising all their joint venture company and strategy and launch. Got on a plane, went to India, and I walked in the door and he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Megan Dalla Camina," and he said, No, you're not. I was 25, hair down to here. He said, "You should have grey hair." So I understand this. I love when Sabina opened this morning, she talked about diversity. Am I too loud? Am I too loud? No, okay, I'm pretty loud, so. When Sabina was talking about diversity and she mentioned sense of humour in diversity. I love that. I've never heard that before, so I'm going to give you a sense of humour test. Is that okay? And then I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. So have you ever felt like this? Think about how you start your week. Have you ever felt like this? Or perhaps this. Mondays, you're telling me they'll happen every week? That's not my son, by the way. Or one of my favourites, my good friend Tina Fey hiding under the desk. I notice a baby in here, love that. Or this is my actual favourite. Gardening, yoga, bubble bath, medication, I still want to smack somebody. So we can feel like this for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons we can feel like this when we show up for work every week and in our personal lives as well is because of lack of confidence. So we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to talk about confidence, and I really want to give you some strategies and some tools to walk out of here with. So if you walk out of here with one new thing that you didn't know and with one tool that you can use, I'll feel like I've done my job. So look, confidence is one of those things that can either propel you forward and really help you achieve your dreams, or it can hold you back significantly for fear, and we're going to talk about that at the moment. And I personally understand this because when I was growing up, I didn't grow up always wanting to be a corporate executive, which is what I have been for the last 20 years. I actually grew up as an actress on the stage. And my dream, when we talk about confidence and dreams, my dream was to be a movie star, be 25, and go to Hollywood and marry Charlie Sheen. This was my dream. But for a whole lot of reasons that didn't happen, and sometimes fear and lack of confidence is not a bad thing. I think I dodged a bullet on that one. So, the point here is everybody deals with confidence issues in some context at some point of time in their lives. So when I look at this photo, I see a strong, powerful woman, and of course I see a world-class athlete. But Serena Williams tells a story of when she was growing up, all she wanted to do was be Venus, her sister, her older sister. And she tells about how that completely undermined her confidence and her tennis game as she was growing up. Do you recognise this person? Stephen King, world famous author. And his first book, legendary book, Carrie, got rejected by 30 publishers. I'm a writer, I'm an author, I can't even imagine how he kept going, but eventually his confidence was so undermined he threw Carrie, the book, in the bin. And luckily for him, he had a wife who was exceptionally supportive, picked out the book, got it published, and the rest is history. You won't know who this woman is. Oprah Winfrey. So again, we all know Oprah. We see her on stage, on camera, as this incredibly powerful, confident woman when she's talking about self-confidence, self-development, and all the things she talks about. But she says, you get her to talk or have to think about technology or mathematics or numbers or financials, and her confidence goes out the window. And one of my favourites, because I have a son who's a basketballer, Michael Jordan, got kicked off his high school basketball team. Any Bulls fans in the audience? No? Just me. I have a 13-year-old son who's 6 foot tall and a very good basketball player. So he talks about the failures and how the failures and his lack of confidence, how he built that, have been critical to his career. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, what is confidence really? We're going to talk about how confident are you? I run a program called Positive Leadership for Aspiring Women, and confidence, we do a whole lot of stuff in positive psychology and neuroscience, neurobiology, career management, but we talk a lot about confidence. And interestingly, when we started the first program in March, and we were talking about confidence, a lot of the women were like, I don't have a confidence problem. Put your hand up if you're thinking the same thing. Oh, no one, okay. I'm so glad I'm here. But a lot of them were saying, I don't have a confidence problem. But as we started to unpack it and unpack what is it, what isn't it, most of the women in that room realised that it was their major problem. And I say women because we're at a women's mining conference, but I'm so happy to see so many men here, which is awesome. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at, really importantly, what are the strategies and what are the tools that you can use. Does that sound okay? It'd be really awkward if you said no, wouldn't it? Okay, so what is confidence? It's not just about feeling good about yourself, and it's not about faking it till you make it. We all have to do that at times, absolutely. I could tell you some stories. But it's not just about that. Some of the latest research that's come out is, and I'll take you through it, is confidence is the thing that turns thoughts into action. So I want you to hold on to that thought. It's the thing that turns thought into action, because we're going to come back to that, and it's really important, what we're going to go through. So why are women less confident? Look, you all know, many of you know, our younger members here may not know the stats around women and how women hesitate and how we speak up. So, you may have heard some of the stats, but if you haven't, just briefly. We speak up less in meetings. And this is all research, but it's also my personal observation, 20 years in the corporate world and work as an academic as well. Speak up less often in meetings, or it could be, on a mine site, wherever you are. You've got a great idea, you want to think about it, you want to say something, but by the time you've stopped questioning yourself in your mind, which we'll talk through, the person next to you has usually said it, and someone said, what a great idea, and it was usually a guy. We know that we ask for pay rises less often, we negotiate for pay rises less often, and even when we do go in to negotiate for a pay rise, we negotiate 30% less than a man. We also know that when it comes to putting ourselves forward for roles, and look, depending on which piece of research, let me try not to choke myself, depending on which piece of research you're looking at, average, women want to have between 7 and 10 out of 10 of the qualifications that are required or the skills required for the job. Men, the research says 5. I've seen guys going in with 3, 2, none. So, we put ourselves forward less often. There's also research that's been done by a research psychologist in the US who wanted to look at some of the drivers of what actually happens around confidence and around men versus women. So he took 500 people and he gave them a spatial test, kind of like a Rubik's Cube, but on a computer screen. And and they had to answer all of these questions. When the results came back, the women had done significantly worse than the men. And he's like, okay, that's interesting. But when he actually went and looked at the responses, the women had only filled out less than half of the answers because they weren't confident answering the questions. So he reset the test and he said, okay, you need to go and do it again. And this time, everybody must answer every single question. And lo and behold, when the women actually took action, they did just as well as the men did. So there's a real, and there's lots and lots of research around this. There's a real piece around here of our own choices around how we act. So why is this an issue for women? Can I just see a raise of a hand if we have any neuroscientists in the room? Oh my God, can you leave? That's the second time ever that someone's put their hand up. Okay, so can you just close your ears as I completely botch my explanation of what goes on in the brain, please? It's only going to take about 30 seconds. Okay, so scientists have discovered We know from the neuroscience research that men and women's brains are much more similar than they are different. Okay, much more similar than they are different. But there are a couple of key differences that really impact from a confidence perspective. So we know that women have 30% more neurons firing at any time, especially in our prefrontal cortex and in our limbic centre of our brain, which is one of the reasons why we ruminate so much and find it really hard to turn off our thoughts. The cingulate gyrus, which is the part of our brain that helps us to weigh up options and look at errors, is larger. And we have more estrogen, as you would hope, most of us do, which means we like to avoid conflict and risk. So there are some real reasons that happen in our brains that are different from the guys as to, why confidence is an issue for women. So that's all good and well, and it's all good to understand some of the research and some of the, science that sits behind this, but what do you actually do? Has anyone read the book, The Confidence Code? Came out okay, I've got a reference for you in here at the end. So a great book came out, and a cover story of The Atlantic came out a couple of months ago. The article was called The Confidence Gap, and the book's called The Confidence Code. And if you want to look into some of the research and really practical tools and stories in this space, I highly recommend you get it. So what the researchers found is that there's 3 key strategies. Let me just see how I'm going for time. Great. 3 key strategies around what you can actually do. And this is the important point, because it's all fine and well to say, well, just be more confident, just speak up in a meeting, put your hand up in the classroom. But sometimes that's not enough. So they found 3 things. I'm going to take you through these, and then I'm going to give you some tools. So think less, be authentic, and take action. Sound very simple, but there are actually some very simple things that you can do. So we've talked about this. We heard about this morning as well. For most of us, we ruminate, yeah? Does anyone not ruminate? I'd like to talk to you. We'll get our neuroscientist and we'll go out and have a chat later on. So the first thing here is, what are the thoughts? Start to recognise what are the thoughts, what are the stories that you play over and over and over again in your mind. And why are you doing it? Are you afraid of making a mistake? Are you scared people aren't going to like you? Are you afraid you're going to look silly? Has someone, criticised you? I remember being criticised in a boardroom meeting by a very senior general manager a couple of years ago. I didn't want to speak up ever again. I did, of course, but I didn't want to. I'm not going to go through this, just in the interest of time. I want to get straight to the story. So this is something that I work with the women who come through our positive leadership program, but also with my private coaching clients. And it's deceptively simple, okay? But I'd like you to write it down. The first thing is, when you notice yourself ruminating, try and catch the story. What is the story that you're telling yourself? And guys, this absolutely relates to you as well. What is the story? So it could be that you have been asked to put yourself forward for a promotion and you're hesitant. And when you start to think about and start to catch that story that's going through your mind, the story is, I'm not worthy. And the story is, I'm not good enough. And this is one of the primary stories that we all have. So when you find yourself with this and you find that you have caught the story, the most powerful question you can ask yourself is that true? Is that true? Because we believe the stories in our heads, right? We have between 60 to 80,000 thoughts in any given day. And the most ridiculous thing is we actually believe them. And most of them, I would say, aren't true. So the question to ask yourself, is that true? Is it true that I'm not worthy of that promotion? And the answer could be maybe, but perhaps I can grow into the role. The answer could be actually, yes, I am. I have 15 out of those 10 qualifications that I need. But you're questioning the story. And the third step is build a better story. So you've all heard of reframing. That's where that comes in. Build a better story. There's every chance I can figure this out. No matter what happens, it will be a learning opportunity. Takes you into what Carol Dweck from Stanford calls growth mindset. And there's a fantastic book called Mindset by Carol Dweck from Stanford that I would highly encourage you read. So that's the first one. Think less. Great to say think less, but you need the strategy. That's the tool. Okay, so work with that. The second one is, can you be authentic? Who's done work with strengths? Strengths Finder, VS Strength Survey, just a couple. So I'm going to quickly, just probably in about 2 minutes, because otherwise I'm going to run out of time, take you through. If I asked everyone in this room to write down your top 5 strengths, you might get 1 or 2. You know, you might get 1 or 2 of them, but very few people, that's what the research tells us, would actually be able to write down your top 5 strengths. So what is a strength? Strengths are the well-developed neural pathways in our brain. So if you think of neural pathways like the train tracks, you know, the thoughts we have over and over again, the unconscious bias, if you will, is, you know, very well developed in our neural pathways. And they're things we like doing and are good at. And when we use our strengths, you'll notice that if someone is using their strength, because they will be really energized, they'll be very engaged in the work. You can see when a team comes together using their strengths, you know, you get amazing outcomes. When we use our strengths, we get to the state called flow. Does everyone know what flow is? So think of an athlete, you know, when they're training. I experience it when I write. You know, when you get the right mix of applying your strengths and I know. Where's the baby? I'm going to go play with the baby afterwards. And the task that you're undertaking, you get the right mix between boredom and anxiety, and you hit your flow point. And that's what we all want. So we feel more involved, we enjoy what we're doing, we have a sense of control over what we're doing, and really importantly, when we're using our strengths, we have a very strong sense of who we are. So it's almost impossible to not be in your authentic self when you are using your strengths. Does that make sense? So I'd love you all to go and do this survey afterwards. It's completely free. It'll take you 10 to 12 minutes. If you've got kids, probably 10 and above, go and do this with your kids. Get your partner to do it, get your teams to do it. And it's a character strength survey. So it will tell you what your 24 character strengths are in order, and I want you to look at the top 5. We know in a work situation that only 2 out of 10 people get to do what they do best every day. 2 out of 10 people get to do what they do best every day, which means the others who aren't using their strengths at work are disengaged, they can be unwell, they're unproductive, and they're impacting both their own well-being and the well-being of, you know, of the organisation. So it's really important for this and for you when we think about the 3 steps for confidence. Using your strengths is absolutely critical for being authentic. And then the third one is about action, which is where I started. You know, so thinking about what stops you from taking action? What stops you from putting your hand up in a meeting? What stops you from putting yourself forward or putting your hand up in the classroom? You know, whatever it is. And what's holding you back? And I'd ask you to think about what is the cost of comfortable inaction? We can get very comfortable in the status quo. We can get very comfortable with the stories that we tell ourselves. And we can get very comfortable sitting where we are, whether it's from lack of confidence or anything else. So what's the cost of that? And there's a big piece here around self-compassion versus self-criticism. You know, I like to talk about it as, you know, like the inner mean girl, the inner critic, which is constantly in those 60 to 80,000 thoughts until we learn how to control that. Okay, so it's my last slide and I think I'm on time. 6 strategies for you to work with if you are feeling like you are lacking confidence. The first one, and again I get my clients to do this and it can be quite a profound experience for them, is to sit and think about and write down. It's better when you write it down, not just think about it, because you'll start ruminating on it, trust me. Is your skills, your experience, and your accomplishments. And if you actually sat down and did this every 6 months, your level of confidence and your ability to take action would go up significantly. Okay, guys, you can do this too. And especially if you're looking at putting yourself forward for a new job or making a career transition, or you're just feeling like you're not showing up as your full authentic self at work, start with this. And you can do it with a friend, with a colleague, with a coach or a mentor if you've got one. And really sit there and write it out. And don't be afraid to have more than 5 things on the page. You should have about 2 pages. Second that we've talked about is focus on your strengths. The third is watch out for your triggers. You know, if you're struggling with your confidence, as everyone, and I noticed not even guys put their hand up when I said, you know, does anyone not have an issue with confidence? What triggers you? So it could be that you get to work and you've had kids issues or something else has happened with your partner and you've rushed out of the house and you haven't got yourself, I don't know, looking, feeling the way you want to, you haven't had breakfast, you turn up for a meeting and your boss says, or you turn up on the site, whatever it is, and your boss or your supervisor says, okay, can you come and report on X, Y, and Z for me, on the spot. And you've been triggered, right? You are not in the space that you want to be in. Think about what triggers you with confidence. And then you can put strategies around that. We've talked about challenge and change unhelpful stories. Build your support network. Julia Cameron, who does a lot of work around creativity and artistry, talks about believing mirrors. Who are those people in your life that see you as the best version of yourself? Does that make sense? Could be your mum, could be your partner, could be someone in your team, could be your best friend, could be your boss. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Everyone laughs. But who are those people, who really will give you that boost of confidence because they reflect back to you the best version of who you are and can help mitigate some of the stories that you tell yourself. And finally, integrate your confidence boosters. What can you do every day or every week when you need it to give you the boost? So, and it could be anything. It could be something as small as the shoes that you wear when you're presenting on stage. Notice my shoes. It could be the way you prepare before a meeting. It could be, what you do before you go on site. But think about what gets you into the state. This is all about being in the state and having it be as authentic as possible so you can show up the way you want to show up. What is that booster for you? And if it's different for everybody, think about what that booster is. So this is, just in closing, this is what I was referring to, the confidence code, and closing the confidence gap is the Atlantic article. If you just Google the confidence gap, the article will come up for you. It's free, and you can get the book anywhere, online or here. And I'd love to connect with you. So I write about this sort of stuff every week on my website. So come on over and say hi, connect with me on social media. And I will be here through lunch, and then I've got to get on a plane. So any questions, we don't have time for questions now, but any questions that you've got, any thoughts, please come and share with me. And, sometimes we overestimate the most simple things that we can do. So I would encourage you to do those 3 things. Go and do your strengths survey. And I think we can give these slides to people if that's of interest. Think about what are the things that you can do so you can show up every day the way you want to and live the life you want to live. So thank you for having me. I talked fast today. We got time for questions. I was told we wouldn't have time for questions. We've got time for questions. So I would love some questions, but not from the neuroscientist. Did I do okay? No, thank you. I'll pay you later. So questions. Don't be shy. Yeah. Yes, can hear you.
Thanks, Megan, for a great talk.
Thank you.
I'm interested in the persistent myth about people having to build up the parts that they're weak about, as opposed to working on your strengths. I strongly believe in the strengths.
Yeah.
How can we teach our bosses to stop telling us to work on our weaknesses?
Great question. Get them to go and do a strengths test. That'd be a good place to start. Yeah, look, so there's a couple of things in that. Thank you for asking that, because that's a fantastic question. There is a myth that if we're going to work on our strengths, that our weaknesses disappear, and that's not true. So this isn't about being Pollyanna about our strengths, just like the positivity work. If anyone's read any research around positivity, it's not about saying, I'm going to be Pollyanna and be positive all the time, okay? It's getting that balance right. The key thing in a workplace is, number one, for you to understand what your strengths are, for you to gear the conversation with your manager as much as you can around your strengths and educate them if you need to. So I joke when I say get them to do a strengths test, but get them to do the strengths test. It's free, it takes 10 minutes. And the power comes when you can start having strengths-based conversations, yeah? So if, one of your strengths was creativity, having the discussion, even if it goes to weakness, how you could use your creativity to address that weakness. Does that make sense? And when we get into things like, professional development, performance review conversations, in organisations where I implemented this work at IBM, started with the CEO and the executive team, my boss and my peer group, and we've gone right through 15,000 people. When you start having people doing the performance discussion as a strengths-based discussion, changes everything. So it takes a bit of managing up. If you can try and get some awareness inside, for what this means and why it's good, there's lots of free resources online. Yeah, I'd start there. Yeah, but get him or her to go do the free test. Does that help? You're welcome. If you've got a question for Bob too, he'll jump on up.
I just wanted to know the author of the Mindset book. That you
Carol
mentioned.
Dweck, Dweck.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Megan,
Oh,
you mentioned before
Where are you?
upbringing.
where are you?
Oh, here. You mentioned before, like upbringing and all the rest of it has a big impact on
Yeah.
confidence. What's your take on the, I suppose, ban the bossy type campaigns that you hear from US and all the rest of it, where they're trying to get girls to be more confident and forthright by getting rid of the bossy tag?
Yeah, go look at my Twitter stream. Where do I start with that? So I think the most important thing for our girls and our boys, for that matter, is for them to be able to show up authentically. So Bob was referring to research around what happens when women behave like men at work. A lot of my work is around bringing out feminine traits in our workplaces for men and for women, because we know that there's research that was done last year, 60,000 people in 13 countries, that categorically says that people from Korea to Japan to the UK to the US to Canada, all places throughout Europe, from millennial boys and girls through to men and women, what they want to see more than anything in our leaders is feminine traits. They want to see empathy and nurturing and collaboration and intuition. And granted, we're not seeing it yet, which is why we still see this research that we see, and we see it at our workplaces, but that's what we need to get to. So when Cheryl first came out with her ban bossy, I came out with #be authentic. This is not as a movement, but just, can we stop having that reference of conversation and start talking about how do we get everyone to show up as their authentic selves. So that's what I think about that. Happy to talk to you further.
Thanks very much. My question is actually for Bob, if that's all right.
Yeah.
My name's Shirley Ann Fortina, and Bob, what I'd like to know is you spoke about the complexities of women working in the world and this unconscious bias that we have. What can we do to work within that environment? Because we know that we're going to be damned if we do and damned if we don't. So what are some of the ideas that you have, which then links into the confidence gap, and how do we close that gap? What are your thoughts?
Well, I just may briefly tell you that a colleague of mine, Victor Soho, who's a postdoc, who one time was giving a talk to a group of people at a bank, and a young woman stood up and said, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be assertive or feminine? And he said, well, and it's actually not your problem, right? It's a system. And she says, and that needs to be worked out. To which she said, well, while you're working out the system, how do I get promoted? Yeah. And it's a dilemma, It is you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And could I say, one of the things I find quite heartening, one of the ways that women in mining coped, and I didn't mention, I grew up in Kalgoorlie, so I know quite a bit about mining. I did a year of geology, but I realised if I kept passing, I was going to end up back in a place like Kalgoorlie. So, which I love, but. Yeah, and so some women retreat into, basically the problem for women is in a technical area, it's much harder for you to be technically competent and likeable, whereas it's much easier for me. So my wife is a professor of mathematics and she understands this quite well. You really need to work on the systems and processes, being alert to it, and you have to work on people. So performance appraisal meetings really need to be structured. Can I just tell you, the solution does not lie with you. I think everything that Megan's talking about is really I understand. I've done a lot of research in the self-efficacy areas. I understand. So being confident in everything, but at the end of the day, you have to navigate that course. But people really need to be doing something about systems and processes. Ranging from audits to how we manage processes. And we've been involved with a lot of organisations where we look at their performance appraisal and what they call moderation processes. It's when you get all the appraisals and then they sort them out as to who gets the pay increase and all that. And look, as a cognitive psychologist, I have to tell you, they exceed the capacity of human beings. The amount of information and the way it's organised and stuff. So I would argue, in the short term, very much taking Megan's point of view, and I'm trained with Al Bender as social cognitive theory, so it's very much in this space. But collectively, you need to be mobilising the change at the systemic level. Organisations, diversity programs, audits, training of managers and all those sorts of things.
Can
Otherwise,
I add to that? Because I want to support that. Sorry, was you who asked the question? Yeah. So I spent the last 10 years as head of strategy at IBM, but also head of gender diversity. And a big part of that, was fixing the system. And the Male Champions of Change work with Liz Broderick, worked on that. So there's a massive amount of work that's going on to fix the system. It absolutely has to happen at all levels, and we could stand here and talk about that forever. But you can't wait for that to happen, right? Which is the work that we're doing around positive leadership for women. You can't wait. So yes, we all have to help, fix the system. The more women who are confident, empowered, and show up authentically as themselves, that go to workplaces every day that need to be fixed, the quicker the systems are going to be fixed. So we have to do both. Okay? Because for so long, decades, the women have been waiting, for the system to change, and it takes a long time, as we know. Yeah.
Could I just add? I totally agree with what Megan's saying. Far be it from me.
Love fest up here.
So, see, mining industry has a very clear analogy to work from. It's safety. See, many people in this room are too young to remember when safety was seen as sort of something that you inspected in and reacted, and so there was massive investments in exploring when something went wrong and sort of trying to work out the lessons. And then, I've forgotten the name of that hierarchy that has, it's got...
Maslow.
No, not Maslow. No, the accidents. It goes from rule violations, near misses, lost time injuries, traumas and stuff. And the basic idea was you need to work on culture. And the idea is it's not safety or productivity, it's safety and productivity. Another, so the narrative changed. It went from an either or to an and. In my lifetime, the same thing has happened around quality. Honda and Japanese taught us that the systems that are highly productive produce the best quality. So it's not an either or, you don't inspect it in. And that's where we are right now. We need a narrative around diversity, which is the broader systemic culture that says it's actually good for productivity. And can I just, this is a bit of a sort of pet hobby of mine, can I just make a point? And the narratives are really important because one of the ways we as humans connect our conscious and unconscious is through the stories we tell. The stories we tell are very important because they've sort of got a narrative and they're understandable. Now, just a couple of points about this diversity. Diversity is absolutely essential. Without diversity, you don't have learning. You basically stay where you are, and that's groupthink or whatever. And my wife, Sally, a mathematician, makes a very elementary point. You'll never become a great mathematician by doing the same problem over and over. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, right? Not even a good mathematician. However, the moment you do a different problem, it's your risk of failure. So you suddenly have this young woman who looks like a 12-year-old turn up on the site driving a truck, and it's different, and how you cope it. So getting people to understand that narrative and start to accept it, that it's not an either or, it's an and. And the evidence is overwhelming about diversity. The final point of the narrative, I'm sorry to bang on about this, but it is something. When you think about it, mining, when I was a young man, mining was about being manly and being down the pit. Well, there wasn't in the pit, it was down the stope and so. But now, Rio manages mines from, I understand, from out near the airport. I mean, ostensibly you could go there dressed, ready to go. I mean, mining is changed, just like the military has exactly the same thing. These machos face to face. War in Afghanistan, 1 year fighting, 9 years of trying to make peace. Those sort of macho frontline views became a major liability in trying to manufacture peace. So jobs are changing. It's and or. It's and. It's not not all. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're good. Thank you.
Oh, I think it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.